much. That's very wicked of you. Dear colleagues and friends, it's an enormous honour to be here today. I had the great privilege of meeting the Senator just very briefly in his office about 18 months ago. And of course, like everyone else who knows him, I was immediately struck by his enormous sense of authority combined with compassion. It's a very rare combination, and he has the power, but he also has the sensitivity and the heart to go with the proper exercise of power. That's not so usual in politics. Most of us politicians have huge ambitions and tend to leave our hearts somewhere at the back door, but you haven't. You've managed to keep everything together. It was a pleasure to meet you so briefly in Congress about 18 months ago, and I'm so excited to be in your important foundation. And for that, of course, I have to thank Scott and Jesseline, who popped in on our AMA office very recently. And it's a very small office, and you sat very comfortably and very nobly in a situation of extreme discomfort. And you were really both very wonderful. Thank you so much for coming. And I had no idea that you were going to honour us by inviting me to join you in this powerfully important seminar. Thank you to Jesseline, too. It was wonderful to have you both. And of course, we met you through Stan and Joyce Parish, and I can't see, where's Stan gone? Exactly. Now, wicked Stan sitting at the back, where he should be sitting at the front. I know. Stan is a really great man, and so is his wife, Joyce. Sister Parish, Sister Joyce, is absolutely fantastic. We missed them in London. They were the most amazing pair for the church in London, covering the whole of Europe. Luckily, we managed to make London the most interesting spot in Europe, so we had the great joy of seeing and working together a very great deal indeed. Thank you so much, Stan, for the introduction to Scott and to Jesseline. We've already had a word with Elder Holland. I'm sure he shouldn't have popped in, but he did, and also with Elder Belder, and both of them have gone away as I told them to go and do some work. But it is particularly lovely to be able to see the Free family. Thank you all so much. And I welcomed a friend of Kathy's only 2 days ago who was passing through London on her way to a big seminar in Oxford. So we too have become friends. We don't yet have Jim Olsen here, but I think he's coming pretty quickly because he is, of course, the introducer of myself and all of us in the AMAR Foundation. May I take the opportunity to introduce Andrew Methven and Chris Frost with me, who are the great men of AMAR in London, and thank them for coming as well at such short notice. Our friendship, yours and mine, between the church and myself and my colleagues and friends, has grown very steadily over a 9-year period. It's been ever expanding. I first of all got maybe to know Sharon Eubank, and now that has developed and developed and developed until the other day we had a big conference in Baghdad, and we had some of you there, including Brett. It was absolutely wonderful. And it expanded with public and private activities. I would say this friendship has broadened and deepened, and it has built trust and confidence in each other's motives, in each other's commitment, and in each other's standards of behavior and practice of our lives. Essentially, I would say that we all enjoy being together. And I've been thinking, what is the magic thread that has built up so fast? 9 years is just a fraction of time in human life. What is the magic thread? I think the magic thread is philanthropy. And I'm using that word in the old-fashioned sense of Greek, philos and anthropos, the love of mankind. I think we share that common belief, an unselfish love of mankind, which is generally expressed free from personal bias in public service. And like the Senator, I am a public servant. And thinking further, I think that the bluebird of happiness that we all chase doesn't come when she's called. She chooses her own flight path. She decides where to roost. She decides who to come and say hello to. And I'm reminded that she comes to us when we're serving other people. You do it through the church. I work not just as an Anglican, but as a member of the Amar Foundation and of a secondary body, which I formed maybe about a decade, 10 years later, 20 years later, which is called the Iraq-Britain Business Council, another charity, because once you have someone healthy and educated, it came to me to recognize what are they then going to do. So this is designed for jobs and futures. And I've just come from a massive conference of the Iraq-Britain Business Council, which we held in Mansion House, which is the seat of the Lord Mayor of the City of London. And for the first ever time, we were able to bring in 150 important and honest and decent Iraqi businesses, and we matched them with British and American and some European businesses. So at last we can offer jobs and futures. This little organization, again, a not-for-profit and a charity, is done through public service, and it has created hundreds of thousands of jobs in the decade in which it has been working. The Amar Foundation, with which we have partnered very, very happily, LDS, was founded after I found a small boy, 46% third-degree burn down his front, who'd been brought over the border of Iraq into Iran, just on the border during the huge, huge uprisings against Saddam Hussein, when your troops and our troops, including Andrew, pushed Saddam's troops out of the unfortunate citizens of Kuwait. I found this little boy, and he was in the most terrible state, clearly dying. And I was begged by the local population to take him back to England to save his life. I approached the Charity Commission, because I can't do that alone. You know, you can't just do that sort of thing. And they said, you can't set up a charity for a single boy. So we called it Ammar after him. But in fact, since then, we have delivered in 26 years, we've now delivered over 10.5 million medical consultations and about 500,000 lessons and a huge amount of training, all at a total on-cost of 9.8% overhead costs. And the focus behind this is a very simple one. It is the second of the great commandments, love thy neighbor as thyself. And to understand, therefore, that your neighbor is just as good as yourself, has many skills, but maybe in a much, much more difficult situation. I've always felt that when people are in a very bad state, the first thing they need is health. And it's not just physical health, they also need spiritual health. They also need psychiatric health. They need everything, in fact, when they're in that sort of situation. You, like me, believe that this is of profound importance. So the partner of LDS Charities, the Ammar Foundation, we put these little leaflets together. We don't do much on this sort of thing with such a low overhead cost, but Andrew and Chris do pick them up from them because they have them. We brought some copies. Thank you so much, both of you. And you will find a lot that will interest you in there, because it's the partnership between you and me. And that's our practical way of showing the second of the great commandments, which is love thy neighbor. I started my work with the Iraqi people with the genocide of the marsh Arabs. And that is the world's oldest and biggest wetland that Saddam progressively destroyed. And he nearly completed it. It was down to 8% of existence when the troops entered in 2003. Since then, some has been recovered, but not nearly enough. And the tragedy of that was that I kept saying it. I was popping in and out over the border, and others kept saying it, and the world wouldn't listen. It wasn't just the destruction of the world's largest wetlands, it was also the destruction of the world's oldest and largest wetland farmings. And this goes right back to Sumerian days, it goes back to the Epic of Gilgamesh, it goes back to Noah's Ark, This is ancient history that reflects directly on you and my bloodlines and our cultures and civilizations. And for a decade I shouted, and I have a loud voice. Nobody would listen until it all was done, and then they all wrung their hands. It reminded me very, very, very much indeed of being a child in a political household in 1945 when the concentration camps were discovered. And at a moment now when anti-Semitism is rising globally, we have to remember that, and we have to think about what on earth is going on. The Marsh people, most of them lost their lives, 99% of them lost their livelihoods. The world has lost the world's greatest weapon in this wonderful farming community, which showed how to farm on water for about 10,000 years. It didn't come under the last ice age. The last ice age didn't get lower than Baghdad. It's probably even older than that. Sumerian heritage. We've lost that. We've lost it because people refuse to listen. So when I heard about the Yazidis, who I'd never heard of in my life, I realized it wasn't any longer just a question of trying to help people with health and education and jobs and futures, that you had to somehow get the world to listen. And of course, one thing behind all of that is, why are people persecuted? So with Jeff Holland and others, we set up a Windsor Conference dialogue with the Bishop's Bench of the House of Lords, with the Yazidis. This is our third round, and we're now incorporating more this coming time. Brett is kindly helping, all sorts of people are helping, because at the basis of all of this, as far as I can tell, having done a lot of analyses, you'll find in this little book, which again is available, a lot of this is due to religious persecution. And that's exactly why we've added a fourth leg to our table, as it were. It was unbalanced before, the Amar Foundation. Health, education, and jobs and futures isn't enough. It has to be also faith. So religious persecution, the driver for forced migration. And what is so fascinating about working with all of you is that you've achieved this wonderful bridge between deprivation, persecution, collapse, horriblenesses, and you've actually achieved coming back again and succeeding. You're a fantastic example as to what to do to turn destruction, to turn disaster into happiness and joy and success. You'll find in this little book, if you have a moment to look at it, you'll find a whole set of tables that I got created by various people. And they're not finished yet. We're doing more. Because I picked out, rather sort of, just in order to make the pattern, one religion persecuting another, persecuting another, persecuting another, persecuting another. Almost everyone in this horrible circle is not only persecuted, but sadly also persecutes. I also have a persecuted background, although I don't feel that way at all, because it's some generations back. In 1605, I think it was, one of my immediate forebears, my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, came over in a cask, an empty wine cask, from France, because he was a Huguenot, and they were all being killed by the Catholics in France. So you'll find in here a sort of halfway house product. I'm sure we've got another 2 or 3 years to do with it, because we're picking out stuff that other people aren't looking at. And why can we do that? Is because we're working all together on the ground floor with the grassroots. We're experiencing this persecution almost as it happens. Andrew and I, the week before last, we were up again with the Yazidis in the north of Iraq, just outside Dohuk. We came because we had more to offer. And that, of course, incorporates you, because we're working as a partnership. As much as we possibly can in as many places as possible. Not enough, and there's more to come, because we're a fantastic set of partners. Little example. The Yazidis, whose religion I will explain in a moment, The Yazidis have lost hundreds of thousands of their people. This means that the 350,000 or so which were left in camps represent almost all the Yazidis left standing. About 50,000 are not in camps, and they're starting to try to trickle back. Very difficult to trickle back to their former villages and homes and cities and towns. Why? Because the rapists were, of course, and the murderers and the torturers, as usual, as always, they were the local people. So one poor girl said, when I saw her in 2015, she said she couldn't understand it because she was being raped by the local dentist who'd been in her grandfather's house to do his teeth 2 weeks earlier. Another one, she was being raped by the chairman of the local council. This isn't an unusual situation, colleagues and friends. The Bosnian mothers say just the same, that all the rapists are now back again in their jobs as the senior policemen patrolling the streets. This is how it happens. It is the society itself that has gone rotten in parts and attacks another piece of the society. Everyone always says, oh, it's the outsiders. At the moment, for example, in the north of Iraq, there's a great call to try all these awful foreigners who invaded us and who came and raped our women. Of course, it isn't true. Yes, there were some particularly disgusting people who came in for money or because they were sadists or something from elsewhere. Some stupid, some cruel, some evil, some repugnant. But ladies and gentlemen, you can't walk into somebody else's country unless you've got a fantastic, huge army, unless you've got Mr. Putin with you and half his battalions with their rotten tanks behind him. You will not be able to do that. It actually comes from within. And that's exactly what happened here. So it's very difficult indeed to recover when in fact you can't see the way through. And what I noticed was that with the little boy, Amar, it's been a long time. He's now a British citizen. He's not working, but he's very comfortable because the society is looking after him. It's the recovery of belief. It's the recovery of an understanding. It's the recovery of trust. When I was a child, my father had a friend who was called Joad, a great philosopher. I didn't know that he was grand, but I do remember the title of his book, and I wondered about it when I was small because it seemed so very odd. It's a very famous book, I now know, called The Recovery of Belief. And that perhaps is the heart of the loss of everything when you've been persecuted for your faith. Why is it so important when you're persecuted for your faith? I've been looking around to find why it matters so much. I mean, it matters deeply to me, it matters profoundly to you, it matters to almost everyone I know. It even matters to those who are Shabak in Iraq, who are the non-faith people, the ones who are atheists or agnostics. And as usual, I turned to Shakespeare, and I wondered if this little quotation explained, it did to me, why faith is such a huge part of our identity. This comes from All's Well That Ends Well. Simply the thing I am shall make me live. And that's it, isn't it? Just simply the thing I am. And I think that when Andrew and I were with the Yazidis the other day, 10 days ago, I offered something that made them very happy. And this came from you, our partnership again. You have this amazing department, or I don't know what you call it, which deals with ancestry. Well, ancestry matters. Ancestry is hugely important. The Yazidis, many of their ancestors, their immediate families, they're in mass graves. They don't know if they'll ever find them again. A lot of them have disappeared completely. Some thousands are still said to be in captivity. Myself, I think they're probably dead. So thanks to Sharon Eubank, I met, last time I was here, the Ancestry Department people, and they very kindly said that if the Yazidis would agree, which is what I was suggesting, that they would bring them to the top of their list, and they would do it very fast. So I suggested this to the Yazidis, and they were overwhelmed with gratitude, because the recovery of their ancestry, of all these lost souls, lost people, lost bodies, the immediate family, the wider family, this particular Yazidi people, they are the most integrated I've ever met anywhere, largely because they don't marry in and don't marry out. So they are just that. And that's why it's possible to wipe them out. So as they shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, this is the 72nd persecution by the local people over about 1,500 years. As they've shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, all of their ancestry has disappeared as well. So here's something we're doing together, which is going to make a whole lot of people, about 500,000 of them, very, very much happier indeed. The thing that therefore that really matters is that they should understand why their religion matters. If you live in a camp, utter misery, a sort of average length of about 11 years in a camp these days, you don't have anything there, you don't have any music, you don't have any acting, you don't have any art, you don't have any culture, you don't have any civilization. All these people learn how to do is to queue up for a food pack of the same ghastly food basket which is kindly provided by the World Food Programme. Same stuff every single week. Awful. And that's all they learn how to do. They don't learn, as you and I learned, how to enjoy the different cultures and civilizations that our predecessors have created. I mean, to give you a tiny, tiny comment that came to my mind, when I was small I read Beowulf and struggled with some of the Anglo-Saxon. I learned from my DNA the other day that I'm really boring. I'm only Anglo-Saxon with a bit of Scotland and a bit of France. That's all. Very dull. But I was always struck by Beowulf's words. It said, "Wheredis Weezer ward hoard on liac." It's a great phrase when you translate it. It says, then the leader of the troop unlocked his word hoard. These children in the camps, they don't have any access to any word hoard in any language at all. So they get narrower and narrower and narrower. And I think that another thing we offered on this little visit, which has been gratefully received, where I hope one of you is going to be at least involved, if not more, is music. Their faith is a very important faith. It is a one-God faith. It is a God that is a little bit like the Jewish God Yahweh, the unknowable. So far, so big, so powerful, so huge, so far away. They pray a great deal, very beautiful prayers, very simple prayers. To the light, thanking God for the light every morning. At the midday, that's when the sun rises. At midday, thanking God for the heat of the day. As the sun goes down, thanking God for having given them the day. And as they go to bed, thanking God for keeping them alive. So they pray first of all in their prayers for the other, and then they pray for themselves. Very short, simple prayers. But I noticed on my first visit to them ages ago that they're all sung. And I studied as a musician, so I asked to see the music, and there is no music. So I've been feeling worried, we've all been feeling worried, that this was going to disappear. How could it not disappear if it's just in the heads of the priests? So we've offered something else, which is giving them great happiness. There's going to be quite a lot of work to do, and we're just beginning, is to have their music very well recorded, but much more importantly, to have it notated. And their music is complex. When you listen to it, and we had them with our Windsor Dialogue, we had them at Windsor Castle, and also in all three meetings we've had over the 3 years, we've had them part of that. We've had one of their priests, and he's maybe sung a grace before a meal. Very simple, but there's a lot inside each note, and it's complex. And so I've approached the Azerbaijanis, who are great musicians and who have notated their music for 100 years. And so we were able to suggest to the Yazidis that we could get all of that done for them as a gift from us to the Yazidis. And they've accepted that as well. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a huge amount to do. We cannot allow civilization to go on like this, by which I mean this constant, endless genocide, this constant assault of people, creation of migrant communities, unwillingly and miserably and tortured and tormented because of their religious belief. We have to act harder. And I leave you with another thought, which may be the only way in which we can get the change we seek, which is of profound importance, this change. It would change the whole face of the globe if we were able to get religious persecution stopped and religious freedom welcomed and loved. There's a comment in the famous speech of Martin Luther King when he was suggesting that a mechanism for reaching the majestic heights of understanding and brotherhood which we seek is non-violent gadflies. I rather like that. That means each and every one of us can do something. Shall we do it? Yes. Thank you very much.